If cash flow is your goal, then I recommend putting down a minimum 30%.
There are a lot of different things that you have to consider before you jump into this space. And so I wanted to touch on what some of those things are. How's it going, guys? It's David Goodman. Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got Pete Blankinship, who I'm happy to announce is now working with the Grow team at Real Broker in the Nashville market and doing specifically helping us with specializing in short-term rentals in Nashville. And we are starting a series to go over some topics that have to do specifically with Nashville and short-term rentals. Pete, thank you so much for doing this, and I'm so happy you're joining us, and I'm really excited to see what we can get done together.
Likewise, David. Yeah, so excited. I know we've helped a few, clients independently, in a big way in Nashville over the last few years, and I appreciate the opportunity to work more with you and your network and bring any value I can, and very much looking forward to the impact we can make on our clients' lives and really helping people invest smartly in Nashville.
Awesome. So if you're thinking about investing or selling short-term rentals in Nashville, you can get in contact with us. Our contact information is in the description below. But for now, we're going to get right into our series. And the first topic that we're going to really tackle is a little bit clickbaity, but it's don't invest in Nashville short-term rentals with the caveat of without doing the right research and being prepared in the right ways. So Pete, I wanted to just get right into the discussion of, we obviously believe that investing in short-term rentals and in this niche in the market of Nashville, there's a lot of upsides to it. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in that, but there are a lot of different things that you have to consider before you jump into this space. And so I wanted to touch on what some of those things are. I'm just going to ask you, we've worked with a bunch of, newer investors and people who have been in this space for a while. And I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on what the main issues are when people are looking at short-term rentals and what they're not thinking about before they get into this space. What are some of the normal issues that can come up that people don't think about?
No, that's a great segue, David. So really with Nashville in general, I mean, we find that people, will randomly, at least myself, send me properties all the time, thinking this is just like any old market that maybe they've read about on Bigger Pockets, or that their hometown maybe isn't as legislated, let's just say, from a city planning and zoning standpoint on what can be done where. So they just see a house on Jefferson Street, which is an area in Nashville that's going through a transition in between two already developed areas, as David would know. And they'll send a quick picture to me and say, this would be a great rental. I want to make this happen. What can I do? And really the first steps, you need to educate yourself with either a professional like myself, David, or someone in the Nashville market who knows, but you're going to need to determine your strategy based on if you're going to live there and be able to do residential, owner occupy it, or non-owner occupy. You're going to be paying more on average for that zoning. But then ultimately too, just determining this isn't the hottest cash flow market in the world. You could probably get a better overall cash flow somewhere in the Midwest or something, or Angel Fire, New Mexico, or Mexico Beach, Florida. But the appreciation and things like that, and the ability to travel here for business, Tennessee's a no income tax state, so you can move here long term. So I think step one would be to really nail down your strategy. Ultimately, if you're just a cash flow guy, or you're brand new into rentals and you just think short-term rentals would be sexy, we're more than happy to help you flush that strategy out. But I'd say step one, really know your strategy. Step two, if you're a newer investor, determine what kind of return you're wanting to get. If this is a 10-year hold, what kind of money do you need to put down? If cash flow is purely your goal, I think minimum of 30% down in the Nashville market to get your, to make sure you're cash flowing. And this is assuming, 15 to 18% management. Are you going to use a manager? we could go down to all kinds of rabbit holes, but the biggest things I would say is make sure you have a really clear vision for what you want to do. If you have that vision, then make sure you're connected with some partners or people like David or myself who can really help you navigate what those next steps might be, including financing, etc.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about investing, don't unless you have actually done the education, read through what Nashville has on their websites on what the rules are, what the checklist is, spoken to someone who works specifically in this space so that you don't end up buying something that is ultimately not going to be allowed to be used as a short-term rental. And that goes for owner-occupied and non-owner occupied. Like, you always want to check what's being said in the remarks, and I think this is getting better, but you can still find properties that real estate professionals and agents are listing that are saying that this would be an amazing Airbnb, and in no way can they be used as an Airbnb. There might be something where you thought you could do an owner-occupied short-term rental, but it happens to be an HPR. And there's that caveat of, for HPRs in Nashville, you can't use them as even owner-occupied, which is something that you just have to learn through experience. So there's a lot of caveats like that you should be aware of before you really think about getting into this space. Now, you mentioned, Pete, putting a minimum of 30% down. And I think a lot of people who are wanting to get started in short-term rentals and like just investing in general, they're not going to like hearing that because, you hear in Bigger Pockets and then other forums, like the minimum down payment's 20%. So like, that's how much I want to put down. Why is it worth putting 30% down, I guess, here versus other markets? What would you say to that?
That's a great question. I just want to re-articulate that as well, that if cash flow is your goal, then I recommend putting down a minimum 30%. The 20% rule, obviously, as most of us all think of, comes down to traditional mortgage, not paying that interest, that PMI, interest for less than that. Ultimately, it's going to depend on what your goal is, what your financing looks like. But if we can do things like DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio loans, we could do some really great things. And we have plenty of partners, David and myself, in that space that own short-term rentals, regularly are looking at these. But ultimately, the cash flow, if that's your goal, I just recommend that higher amount down, because it's going to give you, just like any deal, that upfront kind of investment where, if we put down 10% and your note is, call it $5,000 a month in a high-end scenario, $1 million property, that just puts a lot of stress and pressure on you and your management to make sure that you're always in the green and you're never negative cash flow. That extra 30% gives you that little bit of cushion. So when you have your high months in, May, June, July, August, there's only really a couple of lower months in Nashville. We're a pretty non-seasonal market, but it lets you take that big lump sum, put it into your reserves, be prepared.
Yeah, and I still think, real estate is the power of leverage, and being able to put, like, the idea of putting 20% down on a $500,000 property. Now you're appreciating at, for that $500,000 property rather than the 20% that you went in. I think that still applies even if you put 30%, 40%, or 50%. You're still using the power of leverage, and it also allows you to use the power of leverage in one of the better appreciating markets in the country. So like, that factors in. We're going to appreciate more than many markets, but at the same time, because of that, your entry is going to be higher, and so it's going to be more of an upfront cost. But the power of leverage is still at play, even if you're putting 50% down. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of things with short terms too that we get into, David, as you know, with our clients, that when you're a high net worth individual or you're investing, this is a little bit more expense intensive than a long-term rental. All that really means is, obviously you can get a lot higher cash flow and total return, but it allows you to cost seg this at a lot higher caliper to reduce your total income and taxable expense on these. So that's another just facet to look at. We help people, acquire units unfurnished. We've helped people acquire units furnished with the bill of sale that we can itemize against. So just knowing, again, we've even had units recently that, the builder didn't have a use and occupancy letter. That would have completely screwed a deal for someone who didn't really know what to do to get in there with the city and make it a quick formality.
Right. And the client was freaking out because they already bought the property, and we had hooked them up with someone to help them with that. But even that person didn't quite know how to handle that, or just didn't know, maybe just didn't, there's some miscommunication, and you were able to have a 10-minute conversation. Because of all your experience, you're able to kind of make that work. So again, working with someone who knows what they're doing, has worked with the city,
And that's
is
just,
key.
a quick snippet is it's so important that you have relationships either with the city. And David and I have had many conversations. I mean, there's little nuances in the code. You're X amount of distance from a church, and that's like 100 feet. And they have to make sure that those points are exact. It's 98 feet. You can go through the process of buying, buyer beware, caveat
Right.
emptor. Everyone, you'll see a lot of
Especially with a commercial property, right? Because in commercial, and these are zoned commercially, there's
short-term rentals,
less.
a lot of pro forma, a lot of variance, a lot of
It's on
miscommunication
the
in data.
the owner, yeah, and it's on you to know if these things are correct, because a lot of times if you are buying it with a DSCR loan, you're buying it as a business. It's going to be a lot harder to once it's bought, it's bought. So yeah, doing that. But if with that, I think comes again the benefit of you're getting into, and this is one thing I say to our clients is that we're not a Phoenix or some other markets where there's just zero legislation. So I do feel like we are less saturated than other markets. Now, I would still say saturation is a something to think about here. But if you think about other markets where there's absolutely no regulation on it, that would be the bonus of that, or that's the pro of being in a market like this, because the city is going to make it more difficult as time goes on. And I would imagine that there's going to be less commercially zoned lots like we have right now that are on the market. Those are going to be less common as time goes on. The city is going to say yes or no, and the rezoning's not going to be as common in the future. So I that's just a prediction.
Yeah, I do want to mention on that. I believe now that Nashville, because I hear all the time and I read on Bigger Pockets, etc., that people are, oh, don't invest in Nashville. The city doesn't allow it. Blah blah
Right.
blah. It's a risk. They could take your permit in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, really important that you connect with the right people. But since roughly the end or summer of 2019, July, we haven't had any major changes in any way to the zoning code. Obviously, we've had people that haven't been grandfathered in on that new zoning legislation for RM zoning. If you want to purchase an LLC unit in an RM zone, you can contact us. There's tons of them on the market. There's obviously a lot of people that didn't put it in the proper LLC prior to obtaining the permit. They will not be able to resell those units as,
And just a quick backdrop. So what he's talking about is if you properties that were bought in say 2017 that zoning was okay for short-term rental at that point, if they were in an LLC or whoever the owner was, the city didn't take their permits. They just made it to where they got grandfathered in, and if that owner, whether it was an LLC or an individual owner, if that owner did not renew their permit every single year, they were not able to come back after a lapse in that renewal. And so the idea is, if you're an individual, now if you're going to sell this property as a short-term rental, you're not going to be able to sell it because the zoning's gone. However, if you're an LLC and the LLC owns that piece of property that has been grandfathered in, there is no transfer. There is no transfer. So essentially, you're selling the LLC. So the benefits of that is the properties should sell more like as a residential property versus commercially zoned property. The con, I guess, is that you have to keep up with that permitting, or as soon as that lapses, you're not going to be grandfathered in. But the idea that the city takes away permits, I haven't seen that. For the most part, I've seen only that they will grandfather anybody in who stays up on their permitting, but that's just what I've seen.
Well, and that's true if you stay, but like let's use an example because I've had so many people who have been in a bad spot that have called me, Pete, oh, we closed on the property, we got our permit. All we did was quick claim it into an LLC. That's immediately going to terminate your permit.
Hmm.
Make sure if you're planning on buying a property and putting it in an LLC, do that prior to applying for your permit because it immediately terminates it. It's considered a change of ownership. Um, and that's what,
Or it resets it, you know,
well, it literally will terminate it and you'll have to reapply.
if it was zoned. Yeah, that's right. Okay, you're right. You're right.
Which
Yeah,
means that
that makes
you're
sense.
in violation and you can get docked and they can ban you permanently potentially. So
Oh,
again,
wow.
this isn't to scare anyone. It's just, again, as David said, no one really gets them taken away if you're doing the right thing. But it is a city whereas do the right thing and you're good to go. There's plenty of gold for everyone, but don't go against the rules and they will penalize you for it.
Guys, I'm interrupting my own video just to let you know that if you follow me on Instagram at GrowWithDaveTN, you'll see the deal of the week that I post every single week. These are on and off market deals, not only for single family, not only for investors, it's just everything in between Nashville real estate related that is a good deal. You'll see it once a week, deal of the week, GrowWithDaveTN on Instagram. Follow it, you won't regret it. And back to the video. So speaking of not going against the rules, our recommendation would probably be do not invest in short-term rentals. If you are absolutely needing an investment that you need it to work as a short-term rental and that property is not zoned correctly and you think you can kind of get away with it, we would recommend that you do not get into this. Do not try to cheat the system. It is entirely too risky to do if that property also would not work out as a medium-term rental or a long-term rental, And probably you shouldn't invest in anything, even if it's zoned appropriately, if those backups don't check out for you. Would you agree with that, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. If you try to buy a short-term rental and it can't really be a short-term rental or you get shut down, that evaluation, because these sell, it's not like in a normal market where you can buy a residential house based on residential comps, turn it into this cash flowing business and have this massive return. We're buying these at what the market dictates short-term rentals sell for because that's what their zoning is appropriate for. So they will catch you if you turn your residentially zoned property into a short-term rental.
And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people that are doing it. If you go on Airbnb right now and look up listings and you're going through the photos and you don't see a permit in those photos, they are operating outside of the rules of what the city wants. Because Airbnb doesn't care. It's a city issue. So if you want to have a room and throw it on Airbnb, plenty of people do that. But it's not something at this point that Airbnb is watching out for. And it will come down to if a neighbor gets upset with how you're running something and makes a phone call. There seem to be within the city folks that are their job is to make sure that you're not doing this incorrectly, I think.
There is, yeah. No, there definitely is. It used to not be that way. It used to be way more rampant, but the last 2 years or so, I think that the city has been working with some software to basically be able to scrum that stuff at a lot higher level. So they're catching people a lot more frequently. And at the end of the day, if it's your house and you're never going to use it as a short-term rental, I mean, they're not going to repo your house or keep you from long-term renting it one day. So, the risk is on you. But as far as purchasing a unit to short-term rent with the goal to short-term rent it, huge no. It will
If that's the only way it
yeah,
works is
if
to
that's the only
short-term
way it
rent.
works, then yeah, do not do that without the proper, vetting. And even then, I mean, David and I run numbers for people all the time, and they haven't factored in or know how to factor in properly, taxes, occupancy tax, all kinds of expenses that are going to be tied into your revenue generating in this business. And so they're factoring their cash flows all wrong.
Yeah, and I'm really and for anyone who's thinking about house hacking or an owner occupied, I'm not talking about you specifically. That's a whole nother subject. If you're thinking about doing non-owner occupied and something that should be owner occupied, that's really what we're referring to. For anything with a house hack, I think Airbnb is the absolute best charged way to get the most bang for your buck. That makes the most sense. And pretty much everything we're saying, prior to that does not really apply, in my opinion. But there are some little nuances that you want to take into consideration. There's certain kinds of houses and, proximity to things that, for the most part, don't affect what you're looking at. But there are certain properties that you'll be rudely awakened to the fact that you wouldn't be able to do it. But for the most part, you are able to do that. And any kind of, I have a lot of clients that they're basically, our prediction or our analysis on the conservative side is they're basically paying their mortgage, or they have $1,000, depending on on how much they have to, what they're putting down, whether it's 3% down or 10% down, what area of town, if they're just doing a basement or renting out one room or three rooms or whatever. They're taking a significant chunk out of their living expenses by doing Airbnb, and that is okay. It does not have to completely pay your mortgage for it to make sense for you to do that. How nice is it to be able to buy in this economy, buy in this interest rate environment, in this area of the country, and for your living expenses to be what they were in 2020 when interest rates were 2%. You're able to do that and basically hack the system by implementing this system. And if interest rates ever go down, you'll be able to refinance it and then hopefully be set up for another property, because now you'll have a ton of equity in this house and rents will have gone up and interest rates will hopefully go down. And if not, that's okay, because you need a place to live. You got to live somewhere. So it's just when I'm talking about all this, I kind of don't want to scare away our house hacker clients, because that's still probably the best way to go about it.
Incredible.
So
And David, I've helped clients before, and we've had many clients lately. People are moving to Nashville. Their children are moving here for school. It can be an excellent way, and we all have Nashville. For our clients that are visiting, there's many kind of dadu type of units in Nashville where there might be a separate entrance on the top floor or on the bottom floor basement. These are excellent type of opportunities for your child to have a house that they can house hack with roommates or college friends or first time job people in Nashville or whatever it may be, and then simultaneously be able to have that property in their name. You can quit claim it to them. We can apply for an owner occupied permit in their name, but then that secondary unit being the second entrance, whether it be the top floor or the bottom floor entrance, as long as there's a separate entrance where we can clearly define in 4-inch letters or numbers the unit, it has a separate ELOC code, that in theory you can get a permit for that one unit, one bedroom, as long as it's on it. That just means only that can get a permit on that parcel. You can't get a whole house now, only that one room. But I mean, imagine that you're house hacking it as it is with your children's roommates or whatever, but then you're also getting an additional cash flow from the built-in Airbnb business below. I've helped several people do that over my time with Picasa, independently doing arbitrage, but prior to that being kind of ousted. So it's definitely an option. I know we're working with some clients now that are looking into that type of potential investment for their college-aged Nashville students. So definitely a great opportunity to go ahead and get something in Nashville, but also be able to hack it in two ways.
all right. Well, I think that's great, and there's loads more I think we can get into, but I think we have plenty of time to do that. Thank you again for hopping on, Pete. I'm really excited to work with you more intentionally and under the same roof, and I'm excited to see what we can do to this space in this area, and maybe outside of this area too. So thanks again for joining us. And if you guys want to get in contact with us, you can check out the description. Pete's information's there. My information is going to be there as well. Until next time, we'll see you then.